Hello and welcome. So today, as you arrive, I am live on LinkedIn and YouTube as well, but this is a LinkedIn Live. And you can see the title. The title is, and please tell me when you're there as well. Please say I'm here so that I know you can actually hear me correctly, that the mic is set up, that everything's good. So please say, yes, we can hear you perfectly. So today we're talking about sales and leadership. And the question is, why is sales and leadership in English hard? And why Descartes was wrong. Now, if you're a fan of Descartes, or if you're not a fan of Descartes, I'm not saying that I'm putting into question Descartes. I want to be very clear on that. Actually, there are studies, and one of the studies that I'm going to mention today, which is key for your leadership, your sales in English, if it's a foreign language, is Descartes' error. It's the name of the study. So because I've promised a short and punchy LinkedIn Live today, I am going to get along. Please tell me when you are here. Please comment. One of the issues is that sometimes the comments can take time to come through. So, hello, welcome. Something you should know about today is that I am going to provide 5 calls. Now, I've set the limit at 5 because if there are a lot of people that want to do a strategic call, and I promise to do it with everybody, often don't make promises you can't keep, right? So today, along with this live, I'm offering 5 strategic calls of 20 minutes where we will look at the strategies, at the methodology that I talk about today for leadership and sales. And we're going to understand what your block is. And also, along with this, this leadership strategic coaching, according to your level, according to your profile. We're not talking about English level here. According to your profile, so the types of things that, what are your drivers, what is important for you in meetings, what is your role, I will equally give a 2-minute mindset reset audio recording to enable you to apply everything that I've said during this session today. So we're going to move forward, and I'm going to ask questions in a minute, and I'm going to ask for you to participate. Please tell me what are your. I want to know your points of view. I want to know what you think. But first, why does this subject matter? And what I want you to answer in comments. Now, if you're watching this, if you're watching the replay, you can definitely comment this simply in the comments, even of the replay. Why is leadership harder in English than in French? What for you are the reasons? Every time I ask a question, I get a different answer. So that's why I'm asking it again. This is going to help me align the message better to you. Now, here's a bit of history, because I know you like it. The first CEOs that I worked with were told there was a problem with their leadership in English. These were French CEOs. They were told, so it was clear for them. Their board, for example, in one case was clear, and in another case, it wasn't the board, it was while working with investors and while trying to fundraise that they realized there was a disconnect, there was a problem. Now, many leaders say, I get by, but under pressure, getting by isn't enough. And some leaders say, no, in the right context, I can be fluent, I can be a master, feel mastery or experience mastery, but it's not always the case. And so this being the observation, I know this is the case because I've worked with a lot of CEOs, and more recently, I had confirmation of what the problem is that we're going to talk about today in depth. And in 2024, I worked closely with 2 CEOs to raise funds. Now, instead of doing the usual coaching, leadership in English, I also played a different role. It was an interesting experience as an entrepreneur of contacting investors, participating in meetings, and working on investor relations. And we made a strategic mistake during this period. When I asked the CEOs, okay, so in English, how is it going to be? Is it going to be okay? They said the equivalent of, in French, je me débrouille, which is, I get by. We'll adapt, it'll be okay. And I, playing more the role of fundraiser instead of coach for leadership in English, I said, okay, they obviously know what they're talking about. And when we spoke a little bit, things were relatively good. So there was no reason to believe that there would be an issue. However, this was obviously not the problem when we were in meetings. There was, and for each CEO, because I worked with two CEO founders raising funds, seed funds, and in both situations, there were key moments where I saw that the CEOs had disconnected. And I was there, I was talking, however, the CEOs were leading. That was the problem. I wasn't there as the CEO of the company. The investors or the people that were putting us into contact or the partners, they were actually the ones looking to the leader, and the leader was the CEO. And at some points, this is not a harsh judgment, the CEOs seemed actually a little arrogant, like slightly pompous, like they were above the situation. Now, I later found out that they were very happy. They thought everything was going fantastically. And they didn't understand that I was writing WhatsApp messages saying, they're asking this, they're asking that, because they had disconnected from the situation. What happened? They could generally understand, but there was cultural disconnect. And I've later learned that it wasn't just cultural. And so this is leadership. And this is the subject that we are looking into today. So what are the problems for you? What do you think are, why is it harder to lead in English than in French? Well, let's continue to look into this right now. There are hidden reasons, but I mentioned the original founders that I worked with, one of which that raised over 100 million, and what was necessary for this was for him to be a leader in English. And he was told he needed to work on this, so we worked on the subject deeply. Now, what was interesting is that later, his other founder, his co-founder, saw how confident he was with the board, despite the fact that it wasn't perfect English, and said, okay, I would like to work on this as well. So we worked together, and we worked on analyzing situations to find out what was actually happening. And when we would analyze a situation, there were many occasions where it became clear when we were analyzing the situation calmly, because they weren't in a situation where they were in the heat of the situation. They weren't reacting to cues. They weren't reacting to things that were happening in front of them and potentially unconsciously reacting and coming to conclusions that were actually incorrect. And I have very specific examples where the situation seemed blocked. However, it wasn't blocked. When I asked directly the question, why didn't you simply directly ask or directly open up the conversation? The founder said, I don't know. I can't explain it. Yes, that would be very logic. Why didn't I do that? And the answer was, we needed to continue to work on him actually getting in the right mindset. So we actually worked on a tool directly to do that. But I didn't promise to talk about the tools to do that. And the tool very quickly is anchoring. You're anchoring a state, just so I'm not being mysterious, okay? However, what we're talking about today is what what actually is happening? What is the neuroscience behind it? Why was Descartes wrong? That's what we're talking about today. So one of the issues you could say is the French logic and the rule. We're following more rules of social interactions, and the English, or let's say the Anglo-Saxon impact. But not only, we're going to talk about different cultures. I hope to have the time. I'm going to go fast today. So that can be an issue. Another issue can be vocabulary freeze. What makes us freeze? We're going to talk about that too. And also it can be voice and posture mismatch that sends messages that seem to create problems, and you will see it in their body language or in their attitude changing, which will make potentially you react as well. These are some of the reasons, but I'm going to go to the very core of what the actual problem is. And we're going to go to the neuroscience of performance. How does that sound? Would you like a bit of science, a bit of neuroscience? And if that's the case, that's great, because that's what we're going to talk about today. Why Descartes was wrong. And again, I'm not saying that Descartes was wrong. Actually, there's a study that's named Descartes' error. We're going to talk about it right now. So what is underneath why leadership and changing leadership roles is harder in English than in French? Well, there are 3 studies, so neuroscientific studies in particular, that demonstrate this claim. And the most counterintuitive one is called, as I said, Descartes' error in 1997. That's a long time ago. And it studied people whose emotional process center in their brain had been damaged. They wanted to know, could they still think logically? And yes, they could still think logically, but they became incapable of making decisions. Now, this is more important than we think, because thinking logically is very important, but we need emotions to make decisions. This is key. This means that they couldn't establish priorities. They couldn't make even simple decisions, and they could not also evaluate human and social consequences. So this study tells us that our rational thinking and analysis during leadership depends on our emotions. So even if we're a rational, somebody who says emotions aren't important, or even if we say, I know my emotions, they're very important, this study shows just how important they are, even for rational thinking. And it goes even further. 2 studies in 1997 and 2015 showed us that not only do our emotional states influence decision-making, but also how we analyze, judge social situations, and our memory functions. So this has a direct impact on leadership and sales in English. For example, for non-native speakers. And here, the issue is that even those with strong language skills, we still often face potential frustration. Fear of judgment, which seems to be learnt when we learn English. Like often we say, yeah, English, it's not that, or am I using the right vocabulary, or maybe it's not as good as their vocabulary if I'm talking to Anglo-Saxons. And also doubts about credibility. Now if we are having these ideas, we are having these emotions. And according to the study, for example, in 2015 from Lerner et al., these negative emotions like frustration, fear of judgment, have a big impact on cognition. Any thinking, sociability, verbal fluency, how we understand and how we react in situations. And this includes our soft skills that we need for sales, we need for building trust, we need for relationships, and we need for leadership. And I don't want to talk too much about this because I think you've got it, but this can be potentially a negative back and forth spiral as well. And by the way, if you look at an article I wrote about this, I give lots of details. So I don't want to give too many details now. I promised a fast live breakdown of this, and I really hope I'm delivering on my promise right now. So So what we can say is that the main underlying issue is that because of the change of context, the role that you're in, you can potentially have issues. But also, it's the interaction with your natural profile and the situation. And I'm going to talk about what I mean that. When I say your natural profile, do you like making decisions and moving forward? Do you like analyzing deeply? Or do you like really making sure that people say everything they have to say? Depending on this profile, there can be other issues. That is okay in French. In French, I deal with it. But because there's the English second language factor, which creates some frustration, some doubt, this can have that impact that I'm talking about. So let's talk about profiles now, because I want to give some very clear examples about profiles, and then I can give examples after, for example. So we have the decisive profile. Now, I want to be very clear. When I talk about profiles, we can be decisive, analyst, very social, somebody that has a vision and can easily communicate that vision. But what you will find interesting is that we also have tendencies, and that under a certain stress, it could be the stakes of the situation, the importance of the situation, means that under stress, we have a tendency to be more of one profile than another. For example, when something happens, some people get more angry, some people tend to close down. These are more, this is something about what your tendencies are, quite simply. And when you know these tendencies, you can know your leadership strengths, and you can know what types of situations can be problematic for you. Another thing I want to be really clear about here is that I'm talking about situations, and I'm talking about different cultures as well. And what is equally very important is that there are cultures that are more decisive. And we're going to talk about that at the same time in the time that we have left, because I promise it's a 30-minute session today. So a decisive person, so imagine that you are a French CEO. I'll give the example of a fantastic CEO that was very decisive. His issue wasn't that he was more passive when he was under pressure in English. He actually became, the term he used was colère, un peu colère. He was a bit more active, a bit more touchy, we could say. And this is because his profile is more a decisive action profile. Okay. What is interesting is that this profile, Charles, who's an action-based profile, when he talks, say, to US investors in his case, or somebody who wants to benefit from his SaaS, from his services, he may find them even more action directive, not very personal, that they're not interested in forming personal relationships, because it's a decisive culture. So remember that your profile, it can be more or less easy already with certain cultures. Doesn't mean that you cannot work very well with those cultures at all. That's not at all, because you can train yourself and have fun doing it. However, you can have natural tendencies. So the strengths, if you are a decisive profile, okay, the strengths are, well, you're quick to take things in hand and to take control of a situation and to push for concrete decisions. And what could potentially frustrate you is discussions that are too long, unclear, for example. So there are two examples where this could happen. If you are leading, if you are part of a group, you're leading internationally and you have international teams, and you are leading the meeting and there seems to be indecision. It's true, you are in a role to perfectly say, okay, can we just move forward now? We're taking too long. But it could be lacking the tact that is very useful when you're in a leadership position. When people are, or they feel, if they're that profile, right? Or if they think, or if they comprehend, if they get the sense that they are understood, that their contribution is important, they will engage better. That's what we're talking about here. So there's this case where you could have frustration, but also potentially with talks with the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, or around that area, for example. Or if you are in negotiation with another culture, for example, the Chinese or potentially the Indian culture, where rules are very important, not social relations. There's different reasons that things can be slow, depending on the culture, right? Could be that they're talking about rules. It could also be for other reasons. So depending on those reasons, we can hit a wall, and the discussions can be too long, unclear. Why? Because what's clear for you is making a decision, knowing what we're doing, making progress. Otherwise, we're just discussing. Why are we discussing, right? And the problem is that this can be a negative spiral, because when you're frustrated, now we come back to the emotional component. Remember, something that is absolutely key is that thinking, you need to be able to think clearly, right? Now, thinking clearly opens up everything for you. Thinking clearly, there is the mental, you are using your mental capacities to think clearly. And remember that your mental capacities are based on and partially on your emotional context in which things are happening. Have you ever made a very bad decision under stress? You can be very stressed, or you can be just frustrated. Even frustration has that impact. So frustration makes you listen less. You have less social cognition and communication, and this is a major issue. So I would like to give keys at the end. Just before the end, I'm also going to say, what are the useful phrases for a decisive person to move forward? Okay. So in this case, and you can take note, or you can ask me, send me a message. What was the key phrase? But I appreciate this phrase cannot apply to everything. This sentence, sorry, what you're going to say. But if you're starting to get frustrated, stop. Don't go into the negative spiral. Say, I appreciate the progress. We've covered a lot of ground today. So you're appreciating. And would it be possible to clarify which topics are more considerations, and on the other hand, what could be actionable? You're saying people are talking about all different subjects. You're saying, okay, can we clarify together? So they're still going to talk, but they're going to move into mode in the direction you want to go. What are more considerations? That's a consideration. What are more actionable? Then you will have your action list that you want. Okay, this is the type of attitude, but also the type of thing that you can say. Is that clear for you? So if it's clear, give me a yes. I want to make sure that we are being very practical today. We're understanding what's wrong, but also now the analyst, and we're going to move fast now. Sometimes you're very good at looking for clarity and logic, and you are great at getting to the bottom of things, understanding subjects. You ask the right questions. Amazing for sales. This is a strength in sales, creating relationships. And sometimes quick or badly structured exchanges may destabilize you. Or if you're an analysis, an analyst, you like analyzing. However, you don't understand why a certain culture is talking so much about certain rules that are important for them, or why they're spending so much time talking about personal things. It could possibly create disconnect, but also in Anglo-Saxon, very fast cultures. Again, remember, frustration and confusion, you may doubt your legitimacy, for example. That confusion can make you think, I'm not legitimate in English, but it's not that, it's the emotional context. Remember that. Even if you are analytical, we will think, I'm logically not very credible here, but there is an emotional undertone that you may not think of, but it's there. So what is a useful sentence to move forward? What can you say? So you can stop and say, we've covered a lot of points today, and there are a number of details that could be key for making an informed decision. To continue now, to help me know which details to provide, could we agree on the priority for this meeting? Now, what I've just said, we suppose that it seems that they're not sure what the priority is. So you're saying, this is all great. I want to provide some details that could be important for a decision. Now, what's the priority for this meeting? And they will say, okay, actually, it's discussing this. And maybe many of the things that you've been thinking about are not actually that important. It's communication. It's an attitude, but it's also something you're going to say. Is that clear? So I'm keeping an eye, yes, on the time equally. Okay, so that's fantastic. So imagine you are a connector. You like to stimulate interactions. And you know the atmosphere, and this is great when forming relationships, for example, in countries where relationships are very important. You make exchanges lively, and you may just feel the atmosphere. You may understand without people saying things. This is good for certain type of cultural interactions. It's a big strength. It doesn't mean that other people can't do it. It means that this is your strength, but there's an obstacle. And it's too much formalism, which can also happen, or too little human interaction during a period. You may start to feel frustrated. Gradually, you may disengage and close up without thinking about it, because it's your natural tendency. Remember, stress makes us go on to our natural tendency. We don't do things we normally do. So this would probably encourage even more formality and even less exchange. So again, it's a negative spiral that you don't want. So what is a useful way? So you remember, your job is to be proactive, always, as a leader. Even that you don't necessarily master a situation, you can be proactive. And here is a sentence, here is a key to be able to do this. Remember, every time I give a sentence, it's an attitude and it's something that you're going to say. So here it is. So I appreciate the importance of our discussion. We are taking the necessary time to define or discuss procedures and roles. This part you must say. Now, can we list together all the points and make sure nothing gets forgotten? So what are you doing right now? You are being very open. I've said this is very open, saying just list points. Yes, you're creating interaction. More people are going to go, oh, there's this point as well, potentially. In some cultures, not in Chinese cultures, because generally it's one person that talks. Your job is not to get other people to talk. However, when you say, can we make a list of points, the leader may ask other people for interaction. You're encouraging interaction. Okay, so this is a way out. And by the way, remember, just DM me and I will give you these phrases. And now the last point, the harmonizer. Now we're coming up, so just a quick point now, please. Is it okay if I go a few minutes over the 30 minutes promised? I didn't respect the 30-minute timeline. If you were Americans, you would not be happy, but thankfully you're French, so it's kind of a bit more acceptable to go over time, right? So, okay, I'm gonna go and do the harmonizer profile. So it's generally when you like to ensure balance and listening skills. You have great listening skills, and it's also important that there's a certain harmony within the exchange. Again, with certain cultures, you are in your absolute zone of genius, even under stress. You want to harmonize. So you create a space where everyone can express themselves. This is absolutely fantastic. And as long as you stay in your zone, in your zone of conviction, even with cultures that are fast, chaotic, you can perform. However, what are the obstacles? So if there is, example, tension, or some people are too dominant during an exchange. If someone is dominating the exchange, it may start to make you feel uncomfortable. You may think, oh, that person's talking a lot. And you're going to have a sense that something is wrong. And this kind of slight frustration, this doubt, it can make you doubt sometimes your role. Again, you can think, am I even credible? Why is that person talking so much? Some profiles do that. It's nothing to do with that. And you may deal with it very well in French, but we're adding the language element. And I've not been able to talk in detail really about what are the elements. It would have to be 1 hour, but it's the language element. So this applies to all the profiles. And by the way, in one person can have different facets of all these profiles. You understand this, right? So the discomfort of speaking a language can make you be in a less positive state. It just feels less comfortable. You feel your accent. It's not an accent, but you feel your accent. It feels not comfortable. When we talk like this, instead of talking like this, we don't connect words. It doesn't feel good, okay? That can be an element. Another is the conditioning of when I learned the language, I was just conditioned into stress. I've always been a little bit stressed. It's always felt less good. But it can also be codes and cultural context that can be the issue. So these different things can generally make any challenging situation, on top of the fact that you have a natural profile, more challenging, okay? So if, for example, there's tension, or someone's talking a bit much and you feel that they're dominating and it doesn't feel right to you, what is a useful attitude plus a phrase? What can you say? Well, we're going to use a slight, a communication technique. We're going to say the person's name. So we're going to say, thanks, Jim, or thanks, Harry. The fact of naming someone's name gets their attention and generally starts to calm them, okay? And then you continue by saying, thanks, James. Your point is very clear. Okay, so your point's made. Your point is clear. And to move forward, what key questions need to be addressed together before the break or before the end of the meeting? Now, what are we doing with this attitude? We are getting the person's attention. We're saying, that was a clear point. And then we're saying to move forward, because if the person is dominant, it's because they want to move forward. A dominant person generally wants to, that's their role, to move it forward. And so you're going to say what needs to be addressed together. So they're going to say points that we need to address. We're going to open the conversation. Okay. So I appreciate the imperfectness of just 4 examples to cover every single problem that you could have. I'm not saying that they are absolutely perfect. I'm saying that there is an attitude to understand according to the role that you are playing in a meeting at some point. And it's quite a big subject. So I'd be more than happy to explain with how this actually applies to you. And of course, if I'm doing a live, it's because I want to give value. And I always offer, when I do a live, meetings, 20-minute, I used to say 15, but 15 is never enough, 20-minute strategic sessions where you say, what is the issue? And we see how all this applies to the issue that we're talking about. It can be a sales, it can be a leadership issue. Now, if you think it's more linguistic, don't hesitate, because it's not always as linguistic as you think. And I've made that point a few times. We can doubt our credibility, but actually it's an underlying issue that we haven't identified, and my job is to identify them. And also remember that for each of these profiles, there is a different mental preparation that will be very useful. And according to that mental preparation, I have created an audio. So there's not 4 audios, there's actually 3, by the way, that enables you to prepare yourself. 2 minutes is all it takes. We use a lot of different techniques that studies prove. These are study, scientific, brain science-based techniques that in only 2 minutes, you can prepare. In only 2 minutes. This is a fact. You can prepare yourself for a meeting and perform. You don't know why, but it's better. Why? Because the underlying mental state, the underlying emotions are improved. So I went 5 minutes over time. I hope the time that I went over time was useful. And I'm going to put a meeting reserver in comments. And I'm looking forward to meeting you. If you're hesitating, don't hesitate. Just have a meeting. I speak French, by the way, fluently. I work in France. So all is good. Let's move forward on this. If leadership and sales is harder in English than in French, well, that's my job. I can help you. So I hope this has been useful for you today. I'm sure it has. Let's